I wish I understood why the religious made such fools of themselves willingly and consistently, but I don't. I'd expect people to be smarter than that, but these people, they never are they? That's kind of sad, don't you think? But here we go again with another example, and this time it's a doozy. So strap in and let's get to it. Let's go to Facebook this time for a video from Kirk Cameron's ridiculous show called Takeaways. In it, he talks to Lee Strobel about how to prove the existence of God, in all caps, of course, and we can already smell the fail coming a mile away, right? So let's go through and rip it to shreds, because I can tell you without even watching it how bad it's going to turn out, because these people are real idiots.
This is an argument for the existence of God that if I were still an atheist, this one line of evidence would convince me that God exists.
Except, I think we already know that Lee wasn't an atheist at the time that he did his supposed research. In his book, The Case for Christ, he blindly asks apologists what they think and then just gulps it all down uncritically, never bothers to seek out the other side, and certainly doesn't ask the obvious questions that any atheist worth their salt would ask. According to Rational Wiki's article on Lee Strobel, for a self-professed investigative reporter, he seems utterly incapable of asking difficult questions, providing citations for his claims, confronting people when they make overly vague or conflicting statements, if said statements cohere with his views or assertions, and seems to take the Bible at face value without argument. Likewise, his description of his atheist past sounds suspiciously like the way atheists are depicted by Christians, for example, that he was rejecting God despite knowing or suspecting that he existed in order to be able to sin freely. So no, I don't buy for 1 second that he was ever an atheist, at least not a rational, critical thinking atheist. Lee Strobel, like all the rest, is just a scam artist. But what's your argument? Because, hey, I'm sure it sucks.
And here's what it is. Virtually every scientist in the world now believes the universe began at some point in the past.
So you don't know science either, because that is simply not true. Our particular instantiation of space-time, okay, sure. Everything that's ever existed? No, of course not. Most cosmological models assume that there was something here before the Big Bang. We just have no way of knowing what that is, and we probably never will. Welcome to the real world. But we've seen this a million times before, and it doesn't work any better for Lee than it does for any of the other mental midgets, and that's not exactly a surprise, is it? Why? Because even if everything that he's about to say is true, and I don't even know because I haven't seen it, it still doesn't get him to any gods, much less his own personal God. Because you have to actually produce evidence for that, and he doesn't have any. He's just going to assume God done it, and that's just making a complete fool of yourself. You don't get to just make baseless assumptions. You have to actually back it up. And we all know he simply can't.
In fact,
that the universe is not eternal.
It's not eternal. It has not always existed.
You don't know that. For all of time, it's been here since time came into being at the moment of the Big Bang. That's the very definition of eternal. Granted, we have to make a lot of assumptions about what came before Planck time, and we really can't do that, but then again, neither can the religious, and they're mostly the ones that are trying. What's good for thee is good for me. You don't just get to have double standards because you really like the idea. Even if it is true that the universe came into existence 13.8 billion years ago, or whatever it is, that doesn't mean that your magical moral monster did it. That's something that you have to prove, not just presume. So this is going to get him absolutely nowhere, but hey, watching these people look like idiots, that's kind of fun, isn't it?
Alexander Vilenkin, the head of the Cosmology Institute at Tufts University, said the proof is now in place that the universe had a beginning. Well, that makes a strong argument for God, because whatever begins to exist has a cause.
But that doesn't make that cause God. The answer to this question, if it is a valid question to begin with, isn't God done it. It's we've got no fucking idea, and we likely have no path to ever finding out. Just because you like the idea, that doesn't mean that you get to assert your way to victory. You actually have to be able to back it up with objectively verifiable evidence, and they're not even trying. I have faith doesn't mean anything. You need to have a brain, and sadly, these people simply don't. That's kind of a problem, wouldn't you say? I know I certainly would.
We now know the universe began to exist. Therefore, there must be a cause behind the universe.
And that cause isn't automatically your imaginary friend because you really like the idea. And because he has no way whatsoever to prove that his God is real or that his God actually did anything, this whole line of argument is just laughable. Because if they did have the evidence that their God was real, they wouldn't need to sink to these silly arguments in the first place, would they? They just present the evidence. The fact that they have to continuously make ridiculous fools of themselves proves time and time again that they've got nothing. They just can't admit it because then what the hell would they do? Get real jobs? Of course not.
Well, then you ask the question, what kind of a cause can bring a universe into existence? It must be transcendent because it existed apart from the creation.
And he's about to try to define his imaginary friend into existence, which is blatantly dishonest. If you can't objectively study your supposed cause, then you've got no idea whatsoever what it's actually like. But I really like the idea doesn't mean anything. That's why all of the "that sounds like God" nonsense is so ridiculous. How do you know what God sounds like? Where's your evidence for that? They have none. Without that evidence, though, they've got nothing but wishes and dreams, and sadly, that's all the religious are interested in, right? Because these people are complete imbeciles. And that is nothing to be proud of.
It must be timeless or eternal because it existed before physical time came into being.
You don't know that. Nobody does. Just because time as we understand it within our particular instantiation of space-time didn't exist, that doesn't mean that some other kind of time wasn't there. Nobody knows. But the religious are uncomfortable with that, so they just make shit up. This is why it's so important to ask, how do you know that? And they have absolutely no answers. They just really like the idea. But really liking the idea doesn't make it true. This is also why they construct all of these arguments backwards, starting with the conclusion that they really like for emotional reasons, and then just picking ideas that they can use to get back to their conclusion that they're already desperately attached to. That is not rational, not like these people care. So you're 0 for 2 so far. What other stupid things do you have to say?
It must be immaterial or spirit because it existed before the physical world was created.
Again, you don't know that. Maybe there was another universe before ours. There goes all of this presuppositional bullshit. Because he's not actually saying anything that he has any clue about. He's just yanking crap that he likes out of his ass because he knows that people will pay him for it because they're just as dumb as he is. That's why apologists do this. They get to make money without doing anything of any demonstrable substance to earn it. Spouting bullshit to idiots is not a valid career choice, sorry. But a lot of them do it, don't they?
Must be powerful given the immensity of the creation event.
I might give you powerful, but you notice that he's just asserting a creation here, right? He's got to get to that emotionally comforting conclusion that he's already dreamed up in his head, because this isn't about finding the most defensible view of reality. It's about faith and fifis. These people are just immature children living in adult bodies because they really like the idea of some magical father figure in the sky watching over them because they're incapable of growing the fuck up. That's kind of a problem, wouldn't you say? All of this, and I have no idea how far he's going to go, but all of this is just, that sounds like the imaginary friend I made up in my head. But that doesn't make it real, does it?
Must be smart given the precision of the creation event.
What precision? It's just physics doing what physics does. There is nothing else demonstrably going on. But see, he's desperately trying to get to a being, not just a cause. He's trying to talk himself into his theology instead of letting the evidence lead the way. Because the evidence does not support the conclusion that he desperately wants to reach. It doesn't support any conclusion at all, and it likely never will. But the religious retards, they just can't handle that. They want to know, and barring that, they just want to play make-believe. Because this isn't about learning the actual truth, no matter what it is. It's about feeling all warm and fuzzy inside because you're a stupid fuck. Well, fuck you. You people are morons.
Must be caring because he created such a wonderful habitat for us to exist in.
Oh, sure. You know, the planet where we can't survive in the 71% of the surface covered in water, or in the Arctic without technological advancements. In fact, if we hadn't discovered strategies for surviving outside of a very narrow band around the equator, we'd still be there. This planet was not made for us. Rent a clue. And that's doubly so for the rest of the universe that would kill us in an instant. Are you fucking mental? Or are you just a moron? Or maybe just both? Let me know what you think down in the comments.
Must be personal because he had to make the decision to create.
That's total bullshit. Nature doesn't decide anything. Physics does what physics does. No intelligent decision-making required. This is him trying to talk people into believing what he believes without any evidence whatsoever. Of course, he's just a con man, too dumb to do anything else with his life and too lazy to try. All of these characteristics he's just yanking out of his butthole because he really likes the idea. That's the very basis for religion. Dumb people believe in dumb things because they're dumb. That's nothing to be proud of. So why are they?
And then the scientific principle of Occam's razor tells us there would be just one creator.
It does nothing remotely of the sort. Seriously, Lee, you are an imbecile. That is not what Occam's razor says. In fact, going strictly by Occam's razor, you are never going to get to a magical man in the sky at all, because that is vastly multiplying unnecessary entities. The simplest solution, which is not what Occam's razor said, granted, but the simplest solution is physics doing what physics does. No gods required. But he can't accept that, can he? Otherwise, people will just stop buying his books and paying for him to go on crappy TV interviews. You don't think he's doing this for free, do you? Of course not.
Well, wait a second. Transcendent, spirit, eternal,
Smart,
powerful, smart, loving, unique. That's a description of the God of the Bible.
It is nothing remotely of the sort. Seriously, have you read your own stupid book? Most of them don't, because most of it's just made up in the heads of the delusionally desperate, or they hear it from the pulpit, and they never actually think to sit down and read it for themselves, because they don't care what's true. Then again, who gives a fuck about the Bible? Certainly not I. There's no reason that anyone should. Just because you really like the idea doesn't make the Bible true. You need evidence for that, and you don't have any. My book says a thing means absolutely nothing until you can prove your book is true. And, you might want to get on that. Not that they will, because they just don't care. They just really want to believe.
And I'm telling you, Kirk, if I was still an atheist, I would look at that argument and say, I do not think.
Well, at least he's accurate in that, because he was never a critical thinking atheist, at least based on the evidence. He's a con man, nothing more. He saw a way to make a buck lying for the Lord, and he jumped at the chance. He's like J. Warner Wallace and other idiot apologists who tried the "I used to be an atheist" nonsense because it resonated with their gullible intended audience. Come on, we can see right through this. Everybody can, except the dumb people on your side. It's too bad there's no way to prove that he's lying outright, though. Not that the religious would really care, because honesty doesn't mean a thing to people who are desperately trying to believe. There's something really wrong with these morons. There really is.
And I've listened to atheists and skeptics try to attack that argument. I don't think there's a good counter argument. I think that argument does it all. And I personally, anyway, would come to the conclusion there is a divine creator.
Sorry, but I've already ripped the whole thing a new one, and I hardly had to try. Just because you're not listening and not rational, that doesn't mean that your arguments aren't bullshit. Because here's the thing, they're not talking to us. They're only talking to each other. They don't care if their arguments stand up to any kind of critical scrutiny. They care if they give emotional comfort to the existing believers. The idiots that pay them. That's all they're after all. If they weren't, then why don't they stop asking for money? Why don't they give their books away for free? Won't God provide? Well, of course not, because they don't really believe in this farcical imaginary man in the sky. They only care about the benefits of them lying for the Lord to the idiots in the pews. Because these people are just con men. Or idiots, or both. I'm kind of voting for both.
One of the other lines of argument that you talk about in your book is the argument of DNA.
Oh, so he's just here to shill for his book. Well, of course he is. He's only in it for the money, right? Because that's how all of them are. If he didn't have something to sell, he wouldn't be on the show. This is just a marketing tour, nothing more. Now, I've got nothing necessarily against that. Tons of people do it, and I just ignore them all. But it seems like the religious double down on making a buck all the time, right? It's all about profit. If we can convince even more gullible fucks to join our side, then there will be more people to buy our books and pay to see us talk and all the rest of that. And we'll be rich. Yeah, fuck you. Maybe find something that actually provides demonstrable value to anyone. Because your scam isn't it. Fuck off.
And I think years ago, I had asked you, what's an argument that you just find so compelling?
Yeah.
And you said DNA. And I think you described it, I live here in California, and on the beach, you can find ripples in the sand created by the water, patterns that could happen by seemingly random movement of the water.
Because we can do experiments to find out what's actually going on. We can just watch the water do what it does and create those patterns. Nobody with an active brain cell would deny that's what water can do. Because when their emotions get in the way, the religious have to leap to, nature can't do that, it's just gotta be God. No, that's not how that works. Where are your experiments? Where are your demonstrable observations that prove that's what's going on? Oh, right, you don't have any of that, do you? You just really want it to be true. Fuck you.
But if you looked into that sand you told me, and I saw John loves Sally forever with a big heart around it, you'd say, now, that's different.
And we don't see that in nature. You are just interpreting what we do see as something that you can't wrap your tiny little mind around, and because you don't understand it, or more likely you just don't like it, obviously, God done it! But that's not how that works. There is nothing out there that demonstrably points to any gods whatsoever. There just isn't. It doesn't matter what you wish was true. It matters what can be demonstrated. And this is where religion goes entirely sideways. They're not concerned about reality at all. They're concerned about their feelings. They are after comfort, not fact. Because, in fact, you actually have to back it up, and they can't remotely do that with any of their beliefs. They just really want it to be true, and that is ridiculous. They are ridiculous. That's why they're losing, and everybody is laughing at them. And they deserve it.
Because that contains information.
Exactly.
That's not pattern, random movement of the elements. That is communicating a message.
I trust I don't have to do it again because I've done it plenty of times in other videos, but we can go out into nature and find entire alphabets formed by nature and interpreted by human eyes to give it meaning. Except it has no meaning at all. The only reason that we'd question Kirk Cameron is an imbecile written in the sand is because we don't come across things like that in nature. If we did, it would be natural, and people wouldn't question it at all. But theists interpret things that are perfectly natural all the time as coming from a god because they really like the idea. They've got no evidence for it whatsoever. They just want it to be true, and that's idiotic. But then again, consider the source.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what DNA is. Unpack that for us.
Yeah.
It's not, though. This is still going to be a load of interpretation, not evidence-based fact. Now, I'll let him get there in a second and probably wrap it up for the week, but we're in for a ton of bald rationalizations and empty claims. I can already tell. So let's get started. DNA is not a code. It's chemistry doing what chemistry does. It's not information any more than H2O is information. That's not how this works. Granted, the religious don't care because they're desperately trying to get to their imaginary friend, not following the actual data where it leads, because they don't care what's really true. They care about what feels good, because these people are children. So go ahead, Lee, make a fool of yourself again. I'm losing track of how many times he's done it so far in this video, but then again, I guess that's all you're good at, right?
You have 100 trillion cells in your body. If you were to open any one cell and uncoil the DNA, it would be 6 feet tall.
So what? I mean, really, so what? What does that prove? That you're trying to impress your ignorant audience? Big deal. Because I care only about the facts, and the facts don't need showboating. I'm going to let him go on for a little bit because I'm really getting kind of tired of his stupidity, but keep in mind that that's all he's got. Ignorance and stupidity. He has no actual expertise in any of this. It's all, it seems to me, and I really want it to be true. Oh, and give me your money. Can't forget that one.
Embedded in that DNA is a 4-letter chemical alphabet that spells out the precise assembly instructions for every protein out of which you're made. So in other words, just as English uses a 26-letter alphabet to spell out words, DNA uses a 4-letter chemical alphabet to spell out the assembly instructions for all that you're made of.
It does nothing remotely of the sort. This is what being absurdly ignorant gives to you. He's just drawing a false analogy because it gets him where he wants to go. Plus, he's really, really stupid. For a former investigative journalist, Lee Strobel doesn't know a damn thing about a damn thing, does he? Chemistry is nothing like the alphabet. It doesn't function the same way. It didn't originate the same way. This is just trying to get your intended ignorant audience on board with your theology because, hey, they're too dumb to know any better, right? And that is not a good thing. Anyhow, that's where I'm going to leave it for the week because this is really just silly, isn't it? We'll come back and keep going with his DNA nonsense next time, but while I've got you, What do you think about any of this? Lee Strobel and his ridiculous arguments. You can throw in Kirk Cameron too, because he's just as bad. Let your feelings be known down in the comments, and we can laugh at these two morons together, because that's really all they're worth, aren't they? It's really all any apologist is worth, because they're all doing the same thing. Lying for the Lord because it makes them money and notoriety. It's funny how the religious can't see the obvious truth, but then again, they're not all that bright, are they? If they were, then they wouldn't be religious, and the world would be a much better place, wouldn't it?